1. The night I found the secret train station. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when I wandered into that old tunnel behind my apartment complex. I never intended to go inside. For years, the entrance had been locked shut with rusted chains and a danger, "Do not enter" sign. But that night, the gate hung wide open, creaking gently in the breeze. The fog was unusually thick for a spring night in the city, and the warm glow of sodium streetlights behind me felt oddly distant, like the world was slipping into sleep. I stepped in, telling myself I'd just go a few feet, just to satisfy the curiosity that had quietly simmered in me for the better part of a decade. The tunnel swallowed the light, and soon I was walking in complete darkness. The ground beneath my feet changed from pavement to gravel, then to old, splintered wood. I reached into my pocket and turned on my phone's flashlight. That's when I saw the rails. They were clean, polished, even. No dust, no cobwebs, no signs of abandonment. I crouched down and touched them. Cold metal. Real. The wooden ties beneath them looked freshly oiled. The air smelled faintly of coal smoke and something sweet. Lavender? Further ahead, the tunnel widened into what looked like a small station. An actual station. Old-fashioned, with brass fixtures, mahogany benches, and a worn sign above a ticket window that read, "Station 11, Dream Line." I stepped closer, heart pounding, as if I had crossed into someone else's memory. A single lantern lit the space, and behind the ticket window sat a man in a navy blue uniform and round glasses. He was reading a newspaper titled The Sleepwalker's Journal. Without looking up, he said, "Just in time." "For what?" I asked. He smiled and folded the paper. "For the 3 o'clock train." The sound came softly at first, a gentle chugging, then a melodic whistle that didn't quite sound like a real train. More like a lullaby. A silver engine rolled into view, its surface shimmering like moonlight on water. Its wheels moved slowly, gracefully, as if gliding through a dream. "Where does it go?" I asked. The man handed me a soft paper ticket. It read, "One-way Dream Line. Destination, your deepest calm." I looked up, but he was gone. The window empty. The station now quiet, except for the train. I don't remember stepping on board. I just remember sinking into a velvet seat, the soft sound of a music box playing somewhere, and the gentle swaying as the train pulled into the fog. 2. The house that glowed in the fog. When I was 16, I liked riding my bike in the early mornings before school. We lived in the outskirts of a small coastal town, and most mornings were misty quiet and filled with a scent of salt and pine. One morning, my bike chain snapped near the woods. Fog pressed down around me like a heavy blanket. I decided to walk the rest of the way home, but the fog was thicker than usual, and I took a wrong turn. That's when I saw the light. It shimmered softly through the trees. Not bright like headlights, not flickering like a lantern. More like a heartbeat. I pushed my bike toward it. The trees opened into a small clearing, and there it was, a house. 2 stories tall, covered in ivy, its windows glowing a warm, amber hue. The glow pulsed gently, in rhythm with something I couldn't quite feel. I approached and knocked. The door opened on its own. Inside was warm, not just in temperature, but in feeling. There was a fireplace burning low, shelves full of books, and an old record player spinning a soft jazz tune. "Come in," said a voice. "You're early." A woman stepped out from the kitchen. She looked like she'd stepped out of a 1940s movie. She handed me a cup of tea. "You've been here before," she said. I hadn't. Not that I remembered. "You always say that," she smiled. We talked for what felt like hours. About books I hadn't read, places I hadn't been. But everything felt familiar. At some point, I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, I was lying in the clearing. My bike was beside me. The fog had lifted, and the sun was rising. The house was gone. For years, I looked for it again, but I never found it. Still, sometimes, when the fog is thickest, I smell that same blend of tea and fireplace smoke. And I remember. 3. The elderly man who traded memories for tea. I worked the closing shift at a small cafe beside a quiet lake. We didn't get many customers past 9 p.m., except for one man who came every Thursday just before we locked up. He always wore the same long wool coat and a blue scarf. He ordered something off menu, memory tea. I thought it was a joke the first time, but the owner just nodded and made him a cup of chamomile with a splash of rosewater and something he kept in a hidden tin. The man would sit by the window and sip slowly, then start talking. He told stories that felt impossible. Walking through dream markets in Istanbul where you could buy forgotten names. Climbing a staircase in Kyoto that went so high, he met a monk who hadn't spoken in a century. Holding hands with his wife during a storm so powerful it turned the sky green. Each time, he'd leave a folded napkin on the table. When I opened them, they always had a single line, "Thanks for the memory." One night, I asked who he really was. He smiled gently, just someone who remembers what others forget. Then he offered me a sip of his tea. For a moment, I felt like I was 8 again, lying in a tent during a summer thunderstorm, listening to my father play guitar. I blinked, and he was gone. I never saw him again. 4. My month in the town with no internet. After a burnout spiral in my corporate job, I took a sabbatical and signed up to house sit in a mountain town I'd never heard of. No cell towers, no internet, just handwritten instructions and a mailbox key. The house was a little log cabin with a wood stove and shelves full of books. Every morning, I'd wake to birdsong and the smell of pine. I wrote letters to friends I hadn't seen in years. I baked bread. I napped. I walked into the village every afternoon, where people actually waved and talked. They remembered things. The name of your dog. What pie you liked. The fact that I used to draw. On my last day, the old woman who ran the bakery handed me a bundle of letters. From everyone, she said, for when you go back to noise. I cried on the bus ride home. Sometimes, I reread those letters. They smell faintly of cinnamon and fireplace. I still don't use my phone much. 5. The lighthouse that only shone for dreamers. I first heard the legend from a fisherman in Bar Harbor. If you fall asleep on the eastern shore with a calm heart, he said, you might wake to the dreamer's light. I thought it was local lore, until the night I dozed off on the beach under a full moon. I awoke to soft music, like whale song and wind chimes. Out on the water, a slender lighthouse stood on a rock that hadn't been there before. Its beam was pale blue and shimmered like silk. I walked to it, or maybe I floated. The door opened before I touched it. Inside, stairs spiraled endlessly. Each floor had a different memory. My first bike ride, my grandmother's perfume, a thunderstorm I watched with a childhood friend. At the top, a woman stood beside the lens. Dream gently, she whispered, and touched my forehead. I woke with sand in my hair, a seashell in my pocket, and the feeling that my heart had been cleaned with salt water and moonlight. 6. The library with no clocks. It was raining when I ducked into the strange little building with ivy-covered walls. The door creaked, and inside was warmth and silence. Books everywhere. On shelves, stacked in corners, some floating a few inches above the floor. A woman in a red cardigan looked up and smiled. Time doesn't work here, she said, so take as long as you like. I wandered for what felt like minutes, or days. There were books that told my dreams before I dreamed them. Journals filled with poetry I'd written in childhood. A graphic novel where I was the main character. Eventually, I grew sleepy and curled into a velvet armchair. When I woke, I was back on the rainy street, but the air smelled like old paper and cloves. 7. The man who painted rain sounds. He moved into the apartment above mine on a Tuesday. I first noticed him because every evening around 10 p.m., I'd hear the soft sound of rain, even when the skies were clear. One night, I knocked on his door. He invited me in. The apartment was filled with canvases. Each one looked like a moment caught mid-rain. A bus stop, a garden, a rooftop kiss. The sounds weren't recordings. They came from the paintings themselves. He offered me tea. We sat in silence, listening to gentle rainfall echoing through art. Eventually, he left, moved away quietly. But one painting appeared in my hallway, a street corner I often stood on in the rain. It still plays the sound. 8. My walk through the sleepy forest trail. I needed air. City noise had gotten into my bones. So I took a train north and found a trail outside a village where no one locked their doors. The forest was quiet, except for birds and the wind. After an hour, I noticed things changing. The light dimmed slightly. My footsteps became silent. A fox followed me for a while. Then a deer. Then a little girl who didn't speak, just smiled. At a stone bench beneath a willow, I fell asleep. When I woke, I was alone, but calmer than I'd been in years. On the bench was a wooden coin carved with a leaf. I keep it in my wallet. Whenever I touch it, I smell pine. 9. The woman who collected forgotten whispers. She sat near the park fountain every Thursday. Eyes closed, pen in hand. She said she wrote down the things people said under their breath. Once, I asked her what she heard from me. She read from a small notebook. I miss the way my mother sang while washing dishes. I hadn't thought about that in over a decade. She handed me a folded page. That's yours again. 10. The cafe that only opens after midnight. I found it on a walk through the old district. No sign, just the smell of cinnamon and cardamom. The bell chimed when I walked in. Inside, velvet chairs, a jazz trio playing low, and only a few customers, all reading or dreaming with their eyes open. The barista wore round glasses shaped like moons. "You're early," he said, and poured me a cup before I ordered. I drank slowly. The world softened. When I left, it was dawn, and the door behind me was gone. I've been looking for it ever since.